Hello. You are listening to the Grieving Parents Sharing Hope podcast. We are here to walk with parents on their unwanted journey of child loss, guiding them to a place of hope, light, and purpose, not in spite of their child's death, but as a way to honor his or her life. And now, here is your host, author, speaker, and bereaved parent, Laura Diehl.
Hi, as always, thank you for joining me today. I'm not going to say much here at the beginning other than to let you know that you will be listening in on a conversation I had with my friend, Sara Nelson. Now, she was just on recently with another friend of mine, BJ Jensen. And today, Sara and I are going to be talking about whether or not it's healthy to purposefully revisit the pain and grief of losing your child. Now, this came up when Sara came to our Weekend of Hope. So I wanted to have her on here to talk about it because I really believe it will be helpful to many of you. So let's jump right in. All right. Well, welcome, Sara. Back to the podcast again.
Yes.
Yeah. You were one of the very first people who really connected with GPS Hope, and our hearts just meshed together. It was like almost right away in a friendship, which we have both enjoyed now for several years. And we've also been blessed to spend time together, even though you live in Arizona and I'm up in Wisconsin. Some of it was some of our traveling, but we've even vacationed a couple times together with our husbands. So I just am so blessed by our relationship. Now, most recently, you were a guest on the podcast with BJ Jensen, and the three of us talked about some of the myths people have around child loss. Even though you were recently on, I still, real quick before digging into today's topic, I still want to give you a chance to tell us about Janette for those maybe who haven't met you yet. So can you share Janette with us real quick and how she left this earth, just a little bit about her?
Okay. Janette was our only child. She was 36 years old, so we had 36 wonderful years to be blessed with her. And she was a teacher, and she was talented. She was creative. She had such a wonderful sense of humor. She had a gift for hospitality and blessed other people with her cooking and her baking. She was just, a blessing. And the last year of her life, she started to have some health issues, including she had a couple of seizures. We never found out what caused them. We didn't know there was a heart issue involved. She avoided doctors. I'll just put it that way. Or we might have been able to do something, but I can't make a 36-year-old daughter go to the doctor. And so anyway, she probably should have been under doctor's care. So she died from a sudden massive heart attack out of the blue, totally unexpected. And that's what took her life. It was 10 years ago in February. So she's been gone a little over 10 years.
Yeah. Was that 10-year mark hard for you?
Well, that's something that I think will come up in our discussion a little bit. I was surprised that it wasn't as hard as I expected it to be.
Okay.
All the anniversaries, every anniversary of her heaven going has its challenges. It's hard every year. But I thought the 10, because it's 10, I thought it was going to be significantly harder. And it really wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah. While we're talking about that, it is interesting. I just don't know from year to year what that day is going to be like. And we're coming up on 13 years for Becca. And her birthday was April 13th, and her favorite number was 13.
Yeah.
So, I work now a lot of hours at a job now, and I go back and forth. Do I take the day off or do I work, occupy my mind and not think about it? Or is it one of those days that I'll just be a mess at work and I shouldn't have tried working? And I think that's probably, like you said, we're probably going to be talking about some of that here because you came to our Weekend of Hope and it was a 2-day thing. And on Friday night, I think it was, I asked you if you were okay because you just seemed off to me. There was something just because I know you and something I could tell something was just off with you. And, you said you were okay, you were fine. And then the next day you came to me. And what did you tell me?
Um, I was wondering if it was healthy after this much time had passed to be drawn back into those emotions of grief because it hit me really intensely. And I want to give a little background to that.
Sure. Can you move
Um,
up a little bit closer? You're a little bit quiet there.
so when we came up to the Weekend of Hope, it was part of a larger trip. It was our first stop on what was going to be several days of going to different places. So my mind was on the trip, and I was coming to see you and Dave. I was looking forward to spending some time with you. I was happy to be there and celebrate your 10 years in ministry anniversary. And I really hadn't thought too much about the fact that this was a grief retreat.
Uh-huh.
And so I think mentally and emotionally, I could have prepared myself a little bit for the emotions that would hit me being at a grief retreat. But it just kind of blindsided me because I wasn't thinking of it
Mm.
that way. So at the retreat, just the music, especially
Yes.
music, can wreck me.
Yes.
And BJ and Doug like to sign to music,
Mm.
and there were a couple of songs at least that they did, and it was beautiful. I love their signing. I love the song, but it just wrecked me. And there was one song in particular where I felt like I can't even breathe.
Mm.
I wanted to get up and run out of there.
Mm.
I stayed in my seat, but the emotions it brought from me was intense,
Mm.
and I wasn't prepared for that to happen. So I was thinking, well, it's been 10 years since Janette's been gone. And at this point in my grief journey, and I know not everybody is here at all, a lot of the people that listen to your podcasts are much, much earlier
Mm-hmm.
in their grief journey. So, but for me, it's been long enough that I don't feel a lot of emotions on a regular basis.
Right. Day to
But
day.
I've
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten used to carrying it.
Yes.
And, I think about Janette every day. I'm aware of her absence every single day, but I don't feel emotions a lot. I mean, certain times of the year, the
Sure.
anniversary of her passing, her birthday, the holidays, there are triggering events here and
Mm-hmm.
there that bring up emotions. But, as a whole, I don't feel a lot of emotion these days. And so when that hit me at the retreat, it was unexpected.
Mm.
And I was wondering, well, is it healthy to be drawn back into those emotions? So that's really what you and I talked about, I think.
Yeah.
Briefly. We didn't have a lot of time to discuss
Right.
everything, but briefly, that's kind of, and then since that time, I've given a lot of more thought to it and processed what happened there and why did that happen and was it good or bad?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So you had a friend that you were talking to about this.
Mhm.
And you said that she didn't think it was healthy to do something that pulls you back into the emotions of grief. Did that cause you to rethink that? Or had you already kind of realized, no, I think this was actually a good thing?
Now, when we talked about it, I was still working through it.
Okay.
And what she said, I think that what she said applied to other situations. There are other times when God brings us into a place of victory, and it's probably not good to look back because
Mm-hmm.
God has brought us out of something, and we don't need to go back to it. But child loss is different. It's not in that category that she was thinking of. And it was one of those cases where, as someone who hasn't lost a child, she couldn't really see what I was saying,
Mm-hmm.
and which is normal. I mean,
Right,
of
right.
course
Yeah,
not.
we all know that. Yeah.
Yeah, we know that. So that was okay. But it just gave me some more food for thought.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at it from her perspective, and then I went back to looking at it. No, I think it was healthy. I don't think it was unhealthy. Now, here's a caveat to that. If my emotions at the retreat had taken me into a dark place and I wasn't able to come back from it easily, I think that could have been an unhealthy place. But because I was able to experience those feelings and not be drawn back into a place of darkness, I was able to it was momentary. It wasn't something that, for days
You
later.
allowed it to suck you under.
Right, exactly. So I think if it had allowed me, I like that expression. If I had allowed it to suck me under, I think that might not have been healthy. But even at that, I would probably phrase that differently. I wouldn't call it unhealthy. I think that would just expose a woundedness that's still in me that needs the Lord's help.
Yes. Oh, I like that. Yes. Yeah. If it did really take you under, there needs to be more healing.
Yes.
And when we talk about healing, it's not like pretending like this never happened. Oh, I'm all better now. Like you said, we think of our children every day. But we don't carry the weight and the heaviness of them being gone every day.
Right.
And there are times we can get pulled back into that, like you said, certain dates, certain triggers, unexpected things. So do you have any thoughts about why you were able to just experience it and then kind of let it go and move forward, especially with the rest of your trip? Because I mean, that really could have destroyed the rest of your trip.
Yeah, and it didn't, and I thank God for that. You referred to weight, carrying a weight, and I look at it this way. Over the years, I've gotten used to carrying the weight of her absence so that I worked my grief muscles. Okay, it's like somebody who lifts weights. I have a friend who does that. She's a lot younger, and I couldn't give you a number to what kind of weights she lifts, but she is a heavy weight lifter. And she didn't just go to the gym one day and try and lift 150 pounds.
Right.
She worked up to being able to do those heavy weight lifting things. And with our grief in the beginning, I mean, we just feel like we just can't even live. It's so bad.
I just got the picture. It's all, talking about being sucked under and the weights and everything. It's almost like you've got weights on your ankles and you've gone under the water and you can't even get to the surface because you're just so heavy weighed down by it.
Yeah.
I mean, you feel like you're suffocating.
Yeah. And over time though, you work those grief muscles, if you want to call it, and you are able to carry that weight without sinking to the bottom.
Yeah, you build up the ability to carry it. It's something that you build up in time. As you carry it, you become stronger to be able to carry it.
And so I kind of wanted this discussion to be an encouragement to people who are much earlier in their journey, to encourage them. And this is something not everybody likes to say, is it does get better. And it's not that the grief goes away. And this is part of the thing here about feeling those emotions again. It's still there. When I'm confronted with, like music or things we were discussing at the retreat, I felt those feelings again of grief, of loss, of sadness, all of those things. I felt those things again. So it's not like it goes away, but we learn to carry it. And I remember in probably the early months, especially after her loss, I would dread living the rest of my life without her. I would think, I don't know how
Mm-hmm.
I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I would agonize over that even. I don't know how I can get through my life without her. But here it is, these years later, and I can
Mm.
live without her. And that's, I don't like it,
Right.
but I can.
Mm-hmm.
And if that can bring some encouragement to people who are in the early
Yes.
season, that there is hope, and it
Mm-hmm.
does get better. The grief, I don't know, but the ability to carry it gets better.
Yeah. Now, you said that you came to the conclusion that you think it was healthy for you to
Mhm.
kind
Uh-huh.
of be brought, these emotions be brought to the surface again. What can you explain that? Why do you think that's a healthy thing? I mean, it
Yes.
sounds horrible. It's kind of like, okay, so I finally gotten to the point where I'm not being sucked under, and now you're saying it's healthy to actually pull all this up again once in a while.
Yeah. And I can give you an answer for that. I was reading in Joshua in the Old Testament, where the people of Israel are finally crossing the Jordan River into the promised land. And Joshua tells the leaders, 12, he picks 12 men, to pick up a stone as they cross the Jordan River into the promised land. And then on the other side, they build an altar with those 12 stones. And it's an altar of remembrance.
Mm,
And they're supposed to tell their descendants, what are these stones for? And they tell them, this is when the Lord brought us out, and the Lord was with us and gave us victory. And so this being drawn back into those emotions was for me an altar of remembrance. So I can remember how horrible it was, how devastating it was. I remember that, but I also see how the Lord has brought me through it and set my feet on solid ground. I'm not where I used to be in that pit of darkness and despair. And that's my altar of remembrance, that
that's
God is
so good.
faithful.
That God is faithful. Wow. Yeah, that's so good. That's awesome that having that in scripture to actually explain, because I think sometimes when we go through something like that, it's like, God, I know this is right, or I know this is good. I just don't have a concrete reason why. And so to have
Mhm.
something from scripture to say, this is why it's still good, as a point
Right.
of remembrance and a point of remembering how faithful God
Yeah.
is in
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
And that I can be where I am today from where I started. It's a miracle. It's
Mm,
just a
yes.
miracle.
Yes.
And I think any of us who are further down the road can testify to that, that it's a miracle that God brought us out of that darkness,
For
and
sure.
give him the praise for that, our gratitude for that. Because
Yeah.
if I didn't have God to give me strength, I just don't think I could have made it at all.
Hmm. Yeah. Now, you recently put on our private Facebook page that you were going back through some old journals. You're like me, you like to journal. And something that you put in there that you shared on the page, and I think it kind of ties in with this. You said, I'm beginning to realize that Janette is not in my grief. Janette is in my joy.
Mhm.
I'm not
Mhm.
leaving her behind. Every time I choose to move forward and discover new life and new joy, I'm moving closer to her. I just wanted to share that with anyone who might relate to it. Laura has talked about when we get to the point of realizing it's not our grief that connects us with our child. And this is when I began to have that epiphany. I understood I'll always have that connection with her no matter what, that it's our love that connects us, not
Mhm.
our
Yes.
grief and our pain. And
Yes.
I remember it took you, I'm thinking it was like 6 years or so
Yes.
in your journey where you would hear me say that. It's not the grief
Mhm.
because we're so afraid to let go of the pain because we think it's
Mhm.
that pain. And if I quit hurting, I'm going to forget my child. If I quit hurting,
Yeah.
it means I don't miss them anymore. If I quit hurting, we just tell ourselves all kinds of things. And so sometimes we hang on to the pain, whether it's consciously intentional or subconsciously intentional.
Mhm.
And so, but you finally got to a point where all of a sudden it was just like you realized that was true.
Yeah. And it was unconscious. I didn't realize what I was doing. I would hear you talk about it from time to time, and I didn't know I was doing that. And then just one day I realized, I don't know if it was just one day, but I suddenly understood that that's what I was doing. I felt like if I didn't feel emotions, that I was letting her go.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't true at all. Because like I said, I think about Janette every day. I am aware of her absence every day.
Mm-hmm.
I guess now I just think more about someday I'm going to get to see her again. I think
Mm-hmm.
my focus is more on the reunion that we're going to
The
have.
future together
Yeah,
in our
yeah,
future together still. Mm-hmm.
yeah. And I don't know how other people think of heaven. I personally have the view of heaven that she is aware of us here on earth, that she is able to see our lives going forward. And I feel like she is proud of Dennis and I. She is proud of us and happy for us. And she knows how hard it was. And
Mm-hmm.
she's happy that we've been overcoming. And
Mm-hmm.
that is also something that keeps me going.
Yeah. Yeah. So one more thing I want to bring up is that my most recent podcast episode was about the seasons of grief. Do
Right.
you see that tying into this as well?
Absolutely. And I thought when I read that newsletter, I thought, well, was it a podcast or a newsletter?
It was
Forget
actually
which one.
both. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was both actually.
Yeah, I couldn't remember. I know that I heard that or read it or something. But anyway, it does tie into this because we do go through seasons of grief. I was just agreeing with that part of the seasons. And just because today I can talk about this and say I don't feel a lot of emotions, that I'm not feeling like the weight of it, like
Hmm.
that doesn't mean that I'm not going to go into a season where I deal with stuff again. Because you said this earlier, we never really know what those anniversaries are going to
Right.
bring. And I'm looking at we're coming into September, which starts making me think of
Yes.
Thanksgiving and Christmas. Every year, those holidays hit me a little different.
Hmm.
So how these things affect me are different from year to year,
Yes.
just like you said at the beginning.
Hmm.
So having these experiences under our belt, it's helpful. It helps us knowing that there's a summer season. It helps me if I do, and I don't know if I will, but if I go back into a
Right.
winter kind of season, I
Hmm.
know that and I know we don't usually like these phrases, but this too shall pass.
Uh-huh. Right.
um yeah, I don't mean to be cliche, but it gives me a sense of hope that I can get through it, just like
Hmm.
I've gotten through it every other time. I can get through it again.
Yeah. Yeah. You were talking about how, we just don't know. I mean, like when I do these retreats or conferences or whatever,
Mhm.
I can stand up and tell Becca's story one time, and another time I'm just a puddle of tears again trying to share it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Or I can hear a song on the radio that makes me think of Becca. And
Yes.
one time I want to crank it up and sing along with it, and another time I can't get it off fast enough.
Yes, exactly.
It's just the way it is.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Hmm. Oh, well, this has been really good, Sara. I really appreciate you talking to me about this. I think it's been really good. Now, I don't want to end this without letting people know about your book, Footsteps of Hope. And I had the honor of writing the foreword to it. So,
Mhm.
can you tell the listeners about this book?
Yes, Footsteps of Hope is basically drawn from my journal writing and then put into a more or less a devotional. It's not strictly a devotional, but kind of. You can read a little at a time about my grief journey in the early years and as I work through things. And I call each little entry, I call it a milepost, and it's called Footsteps of Hope, Milepost to Guide Your Journey Through the Grief of Child Loss.
Yeah, and I like
And
those
yeah.
milepost markers because they're almost kind of like what we're talking about today. The markers, the things that it's like, okay, I'm just a little bit further. I'm one step further. And sometimes we do feel like we've gone, one step ahead and then two steps backwards.
Mhm.
But that's just part of the journey. And I think
Yes.
sometimes we feel like we're going backward more than we really are.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so Sara has a lot of nuggets in her book about, our grief journey with child loss. So I do recommend you take a look at it, consider getting it. So Sara, do you have
Mhm.
any last thoughts to share?
Just recognizing that when we hit those places where we feel like we're drawn back into our grief, it's an opportunity to see how far we've come and to recognize, like setting up that altar of remembrance, to recognize how good God is and how great his comfort has been through the passage of time.
So, well, thank you, Sara. I always treasure the time that we have together.
Mhm.
So, and I love you and can't wait to see you on the grief cruise.
And yeah, yeah, that's the next thing to look forward to. And I just want to say, I don't think I had thought of it for a while, how close it is, really. You lost Becca in 2011, and we lost Janette in 2014.
Mm-hmm.
So you were still in your third year
Yes.
when I was just
Yes.
beginning my grief journey. And having walked through that, I I just think back to where you were at that time.
Mm,
And I'm just so grateful for your ministry
mm.
and, of course, your friendship.
Yes.
But it was your ministry that I connected with before we really
Mm-hmm.
developed this friendship. And I was just so thankful to have found GPS Hope, that
Mm.
it made such a tremendous difference for me.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, I hear from a lot of people, and I'm just very thankful. I know it sounds really strange, but I just so often I'm just so amazed and so I feel honored that God
Mhm.
actually chose me to trust me with so
Mhm.
many shattered hearts and lives that
Mhm.
that's another miracle itself
Right,
right there.
right,
So,
right.
all right. Well, thank you
Mhm.
again, Sara. I really hope there were some things shared in our conversation that were helpful to you. As a summary, both Sara and I, who are a decade or more on this journey of child loss, believe that yes, it is okay to revisit the pain of missing your child as long as you don't allow yourself to get stuck there. Not only is it okay, there are probably times that we even should. Now, the morning after Sara and I had this conversation, I heard something really interesting, and that is the difference between pain and suffering. And what this person said is pain is unavoidable because it's based on something that happens to us. But suffering is the interpretation of that event, which is our thoughts, our judgments, and beliefs based on the pain we are feeling. So this indicates that pain causes suffering. Pain is what happens to us. Suffering is how we respond to that pain. And we are the ones who determine the amount of suffering based on what we do with that pain. The constant thoughts of why me? This isn't fair. I can't do this will really prolong the suffering. Now, I know the first few weeks and months and even the first couple of years, 2 or 3 years, we can be just in survival mode. And there's no way we can pull ourselves out of that at first. It just encompasses us. It just consumes us. But right now, we're talking about that feeling like we're underwater with weight on us, feeling like we're drowning, like there's no way we're ever going to be able to breathe again. And I get that. If you have read my book, When Tragedy Strikes, you know I get it. There are questions and thoughts that we have to work our way through when we're in that suffocating dark place. But I want to suggest to you that you will, or maybe you already have, gotten to a place where you are the one who determines when that corner is turned and the suffering from the pain starts to ease a bit. We do turn a corner and we start making a choice whether we're going to stay in that pain or whether we're going to make choices to do things to bring us out of that place. Like I said at first, we don't have a choice. We are there. But you know when you start making choices of staying there or choices of climbing out or accepting help climbing out, whether it's God's help or something like listening to this podcast, hanging on to that hope that's being thrown to you. So how do we do that? We change what we tell ourselves and the questions we're asking. So instead of saying, I can't do this, tell yourself that it would take a miracle, knowing that God does miracles. Instead of asking why, start asking how. How can I get through this? How is God going to get me to want to live here, to be okay being here without my child? How can I connect with others more often, or a group or whatever who've gotten through this that can give me the hope I need? How am I going to go forward? Those are the kinds of questions that we can ask instead of the why questions. And I know we can't help but ask the why questions, but we can also choose to ask the how questions and let the why questions go a little bit. And they're going to come back up again once in a while, and they do. Let me wrap this up, though, with a thought that might also help you turn that corner. The pain that we are going through is not bigger than what God can get us through. I want to personalize that and say it again. The pain that you are going through is not bigger than what God can get you through. I mentioned my book, When Tragedy Strikes. Now, I don't talk about my books very often, except when I was working on the book of daily readings called Reflections of Hope. And I realize some of you may not even know that you can get books that I have written, that you can just pick up and read whenever you need that extra boost of hope and encouragement. And you might even be more interested now that I'm going to be doing the podcast every other week for a while. The book, When Tragedy Strikes, Rebuilding Your Life with Hope and Healing After the Death of Your Child, compares rebuilding our lives to the rebuilding of a house. Now, each room has a specific tie to our loss. These are just some of the chapters. The garage of tears, the bedroom of rest, the kitchen of usefulness, sitting on the porch of your identity, the cornerstone of trust, putting on the roof of hope. And my husband even wrote a chapter about the support beam of grace. To find out more about this book, When Tragedy Strikes, and the other books I've written to help you on this unwanted journey, just go to gpshope.org/books. You can order When Tragedy Strikes or any of my books on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, even Walmart.com. Pretty much anywhere you like to get your books from, you can pick up any of my books. I also want to remind you that we have shirts with the message, Hold On, Pain Eases, There Is Hope. With the cooler weather coming, you might want to check out our long sleeve t-shirts, our hoodies, sweatshirts, sweat jackets. We have a lot of different colors and sizes. Just go to GPS Hope and click on the store tab to check it all out. And you can also find my books there in the store. I will put a link to both the books and the shirts in the show notes. Let's go ahead with our birthday segment. Now, since I'm doing the podcast every other week for a while, obviously the birthday segment will be a little bit longer, covering 2 weeks instead of just one. But I hope you still take the time to listen through it as a way to honor the children of your fellow pareavors. Now, if you would like to have your child added to the birthday segment, I'll tell you how to do that after I share these birthdays. So these are the birthdays that have been submitted from September 1st through September 14th. Stephanie Wright was born on September 1st and is forever 26. Brianna Dogan was born on September 5th and is forever 22. Alicia DeFranco was born on September 6th and is forever 24. Brady Keith Herbert was born on September 7th and is forever 30. Jacob Sorori was born on September 8th and is forever 32. Emma Ho was born on September 9th and is forever 10 years old. Paul Murphy was born on September 9th and is forever 21. Zachary Tyler was born on September 11th and is forever 18. Patrina Charlene Bostick was born on September 12th and is forever 23. We celebrate the day these children came into the world. We know it will always be a special and important day for these families. If you would like to have your child added to the birthday segment, just go to gpshope.org/birthdays. You're not going to be able to go to the website and find it, so go to gpshope.org/birthdays. There'll be a form that will pop up. Just fill it out, including the pronunciation of your child's name if it's mispronounced at times, because I really want to be able to say it correctly for you. Just fill out the form, hit submit, and we will add your child to the birthday segment the week, or that 2 weeks of his or her birthday, depending on where I am in this whole podcast season right now. Dave will also send you an email to remind you to listen that week so you can hear your child's name. Some of you may be thinking, I don't want to feel those feelings again because I don't want to be stuck there again. It's too painful. Why would I ever want to go back to that once I get out of this? But allowing yourself to be human, allowing yourself to feel the pain of missing your child years down the road is healthier than trying to avoid it at all costs. It's like any emotion that we try to stuff down or avoid. It's going to come out in other ways, which is very unhealthy emotionally, mentally, and literally even physically in our bodies. It also helps you to be able to get out of the box of being numb to your feelings and being numb to life. If you don't allow yourself to feel the pain of missing your child occasionally, it's also going to be difficult for you to feel joy and happiness because it's like we're just flatlining with our emotions. The fact that you don't want to go there because you don't want to be stuck there, I think that shows that you won't be, because most of us have found, like Sarah shared, that our time there does get shorter. So the bottom line is that it can be a good thing to occasionally put ourselves in a place where we know we feel the painful grief and the weight of missing our child once we get beyond that. First, because it helps us realize that we've not just gone on without them as if they never existed. And second, it is a reminder of how far we have come because of God's faithfulness and because of the miracle He did in our lives to get us to that place. Most of you listening, though, are still in that place of feeling sucked under by the darkness, and you can't imagine ever being to the place where you can breathe and live again, much less being okay with taking yourself back to this place. And let me assure you that going back and feeling the pain, whether it's by choice, like going to a retreat, or not by choice with something that triggers the reminder of your loss, it's not the same as living where you are now. Feeling the weight of it and being sucked under by it are two different things. I agree with Sarah that you will get there. It may not seem like it, but you will. So just keep going, one day, 1 hour, one breath at a time. Hold on. Pain eases. There is hope.